How could Israel, home of the feared Mossad, as well as the no less capable Amman and Shin Bet, be so surprised on October 7th, 2023? In this video, you will hear a story of misguided faith in technology, political discord, incorrect military doctrine, and the innovativeness of Hamas. At the same time, we will explore how comparable this event is to the Yom Kippur War of 1973. Since Hamas took power in the Gaza Strip, there have been several wars between Israel and Hamas. While Israel had previously invaded Gaza in 2008 and 2014, since then it had largely sufficed to conduct airstrikes to target depots, tunnels, and Hamas personnel. This regular reduction of Hamas capabilities was termed mowing the grass, meaning cutting down Hamas whenever they grew too strong. Despite recurring escalations, Israel convinced itself that this mowing the grass strategy, combined with its technological superiority, was sufficient and a long-term solution. The government believed it did not need to strive to destroy Hamas or seek a real political solution. On the contrary, perhaps Hamas could even be used to force concessions from Fatah. Occasionally arms clashes would occur, but subsequent airstrikes would keep the threat from Hamas at a low level. At the same time, it was believed that Hamas had lost interest in real combat. Besides military miscalculations, intelligence agencies also failed. Israel was internally divided and distracted, while Hamas demonstrated great learning and innovative capabilities. We plan to divide the video into 4 chapters. First, Israeli faith in technology and its consequences on doctrine. Second, the political discord and its effect. Third, how intelligence could fail so comprehensively. In conclusion, we will examine how close we are to a repetition of the Yom Kippur War. Since Israel developed into a high-tech state and received the latest technology from the USA, the belief in its technological superiority has become almost religious. Israel now considers itself so superior to Arab armies that it has developed the decisive victory doctrine. This doctrine relies on Israel's superiority in ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, ensuring that smaller, distributed but networked Israeli units can achieve a quick and clear victory with precision strikes. Machine learning would identify targets while precision weapons would destroy them. This would require fewer soldiers on the ground, allowing Israel to maintain a smaller army with stronger firepower. For a country with a small population, this would be a significant relief for the state budget and a boost to the economy. This doctrine worked in tandem with a special technique to contain the threat from Hamas in the Gaza Strip. With its revolutionary Iron Dome, Israel developed a system that can intercept and destroy rockets and mortar shells with very high reliability. The innovative air defense system even calculates where the projectiles will land and only intercepts those that threaten human lives. While this was supposed to reduce the threat from the Gaza Strip from the air, Israel completed the Iron Dome with the Iron Wall to keep Hamas and their weapons safely away from the Israeli population. The Iron Wall refers to the border fortification against Gaza, which gave Israel a sense of invincibility. Indeed, the system is impressive. The fence is 6 meters high, or 20 feet, with barbed wire preventing easy climbing. Modern sensors are complemented by cameras, as well as roving and flying drones. Seismic sensors would detect digging activity, thus preventing new terror tunnels, like those used for the abduction of Gilad Shalit in 2006. Instead of stationing large numbers of soldiers along the border with the Gaza Strip, the IDF relied on remotely controlled machine guns rather than manned posts. The 23 manned observation points along the border each had only 1 soldier. Young women, chosen for their higher alertness, who were the first to be killed. However, the manufacturer itself said in 2018, it serves for real-time monitoring of the border crossings and is not designed to stop a mass rush. In fact, it would only take about 30 seconds to cross the fence. These 3 factors, the doctrine, Iron Dome, and Iron Wall, led to a situation where there were not enough soldiers on the ground, who were also too passive. An area that a few years ago was covered by a tank platoon with 3 MBTs was now protected by only 1 tank. The responsible headquarters was located directly on the border with Gaza. This is excellent for military coordination, but only as long as it is not stormed, which the overwhelming Israeli superiority was supposed to prevent. Many commanders were concentrated in this one base, and coordination of units was no longer possible once the base was taken out and the personnel was either killed or abducted. The perceived security also led to neglect of own preparations for the worst-case scenario. Even the RAF had practically no security precautions, despite being within walking distance of the Gaza Strip. The present police were only armed with pistols and were more responsible for maintaining order than for security. Despite being a stone's throw away, a publicly announced mass gathering was equipped only with personnel to break up a drunken fight. The number of policemen, their equipment, and their armament were completely inadequate for a confrontation with terrorists. The few policemen at the RAF were also recognizable by their uniforms and were accordingly shot first. As if the military mistakes were not enough, political ones were added. The perceived complete superiority allowed the Netanyahu government to no longer see Hamas as a serious threat. Therefore, the government in Jerusalem believed it could politically use a terrorist organization which aims to annihilate Israel and murder all Jews against the relatively much more moderate Fatah. Concessions to the Palestinians were not necessary, as they could no longer be a serious threat and a political solution was no longer seriously pursued. Rather, Netanyahu was primarily concerned with securing his rule, which was associated with constant corruption allegations and the threat of imprisonment. The judicial reform that divided the country last year thus had not only domestic political consequences, it likely also motivated Hamas. Both the heads of Shin Bet and Mossad, the 2 major intelligence agencies, reported that the internal protests would weaken military readiness. The statements were ignored and may have also had a negative impact on the trust in their reports, as they were seen as siding with the political opposition in the eyes of the government. There were already rumors that the Mossad had fueled protests. The fact that the military tolerated left-leaning reservists who refused service in protest against the judicial reform also distanced the political leadership from its security organs, as did the constant resistance of Shin Bet to the policy of the new security minister, who was described as a settler extremist. This created a massive distance between intelligence agencies and politics. The fact that the new settlement construction under this security minister fueled the tensions in the West Bank and required more troops for control there did the rest. Soldiers who would have previously guarded the Gaza Strip were now scattered in the West Bank, where no iron wall protected the settlements in the same way. As described, since the threat from Hamas was no longer really taken serious, it was thought that it could be dealt with as if it were no longer the organization it is. It was simply assumed that Hamas would be interested in the welfare of the population of the Gaza Strip and could be influenced and contained. Economic incentives were also supposed to serve this purpose. In 2022, 67,000 trucks with goods were sent to Gaza. Since the Gaza Strip depends on Israel, its population benefited directly from Israel allowing more goods through. While this alone improved the economic situation in the area governed by Hamas, Israel had also declared on September 22nd this year that 17,000 residents of Gaza would receive work permits in Israel, with the number later rising to 20,000. The high Israeli wages would thus also flow into the Gaza Strip. It was ruled out that Hamas would take this risk. Naively, Israeli planners believed that Hamas would prioritize the well-being of the inhabitants of Gaza over the destruction of Israel. The strategy showed great success. Hamas had stopped the shelling, and only the Islamic Jihad carried out rocket attacks. These were mostly prevented by Israel, based on information from their agents in the Gaza Strip. Since these agents apparently kept quiet about the preparations for October 7th, it is now suspected that many of these agents might have served Hamas by fighting the Islamic Jihad competition with false information and making themselves credible. For Hamas, it was a brilliant move. The simultaneously demonstrative inactivity of Hamas gave the impression that Hamas would join the Sunni rapprochement with Israel and concentrate only on suppressing the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is the only remaining competitor in the Gaza Strip, financed by Iran and propagating Shiism. Without any real basis, it was simply assumed that the explicitly Islamic organization had become nationalistic, even though it had always shown no interest in Palestinian nationalism, which had always included Christians. At the same time, the very successful rapprochement of Israel with numerous Sunni states increasingly pushed the concerns of the Palestinians into the background, and Hamas would face a loss of significance if Israel were to make peace with the Arab world. To survive as a powerful organization in the long term, Hamas would always need outside help, and Israeli peace treaties with the supporting states would prevent this. While false basic assumptions thus met a probably cleverly planned calming campaign by Hamas, there were nevertheless signs. They were just not interpreted correctly. In general, there are always pieces of information that appear obvious with the benefit of hindsight, but were misunderstood or misinterpreted at the time. Israel's problem is not that they had too little information, they had too much. With increasing data acquisition capabilities, the amount of data grew. This forced the Israeli intelligence agencies to rely massively on AI, not only because of the sheer volume of data that could no longer be processed manually, but also again because of the aforementioned faith in technology. In 2021, this was even presented to the global public and touted as a success. It is now clear that Hamas learned from this information, likely with the support of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Machine learning, which probably forms the basis here, learns from examples. By repeatedly presenting the same behavior to the sensors without escalating into a violent confrontation, Hamas made the AI complacent. Hamas conducted marches similar to the one before October 7th attack without actually attacking, making the AI classify the October 7th build-up as normal activity. Currently, not all information is available, and the Israeli investigative report is not expected until at least 2024. However, it is certain that numerous warning signals were available. The analysts and the supporting AI, however, were confident that no threat was imminent this time. On the night of October 7th, Shin Bet recorded messages on Hamas military channels from 3 a.m. These had been used in the past for exercises. The unit specifically tasked with monitoring these channels had been reassigned a year earlier to focus on Hezbollah and Iran, as they were perceived as greater threats. The head of Shin Bet saw no need for a response, and the prime minister was not woken up. People repeatedly approached the border, and Hamas realized that despite the exclusion zone, they were not killed, but only sent away. For a surprise attack on the barrier, every second is crucial, if one is not seen as a threat until hundreds of meters away. Instead of only after detonating an explosive to breach the fence, valuable reaction time is taken from the Israelis. Tactical finesse by Hamas met significant mistakes by the Israelis. As with all previous feigned attacks and exercises, Hamas did what observers and AI understood as normal behavior for an exercise. Based on their experience, Hamas knew exactly how Israel would react. To slow down this reaction, Hamas attacked communication nodes, especially cell towers, which were apparently also used for military purpose locally. Hamas snipers targeted cameras specifically, and remote-controlled weapon stations were destroyed by drones. When sensors and communications failed, 2,000 terrorists crossed over the border. One of the first targets was the local HQ, which was overrun. This delayed the Israeli forces' response by many hours. We have now discussed the mistakes made on the Israeli side, militarily, politically, and by intelligence services. We have also talked about Hamas' clever planning. But the date Hamas chose was surely no coincidence. The attack on Israel occurred almost exactly 50 years after. Hamas clearly wanted to echo the war understood in the Arab world as an Arab victory. But the parallels are not limited to the date. As in 1973, Israel had previously achieved a series of clear military successes, creating a sense of invincibility. This was accompanied by an increase in its military capabilities. The hostilities of the neighbor was known, but the border was fortified. In 1973, there were 16 widely spaced outposts with 441 men to hold back thousands, if not tens of thousands of Egyptian soldiers until mechanized troops arrived for reinforcements. The fortifications were considered so strong that Egypt was supposed to be held back for days, according to Israeli plans. In fact, the Egyptians crossed them within a few hours using innovative methods. Repeated noticeable exercises could have been build-ups for attack. Troops were repeatedly moved to the Suez Canal border, only to withdraw again. An attack was repeatedly expected, but the exercises turned out to be false alarms, until it was no longer an exercise. In 1973, as well as in 2023, the enemy's capabilities for complex planning were completely underestimated, while the available information was misjudged. In 1973, spies reported attack plans, and the Israelis noticed increased activity at Egyptian airports. But in 2023, as in 1973, Israel knew better. Egypt would have to take out the Israeli Air Force, requiring new jets that would only be delivered in 1974. Pilots wouldn't be ready before 1975. So Israel knew no attack could come, regardless of what the intelligence services reported. After all, Egypt would surely lose a war, so why start one? In 1973, the Jordanian king warned Golda Meir, who ignored it. In 2023, Egypt is said to have warned Netanyahu, who, however, denies this. If I hadn't mentioned any years here, it would have been difficult for us to place some of these points in time. So similar were the events of October 7th, 2023 and October 6, 1973 in their prehistory. However similar the previous events might be, the rest is different. Egyptian President Anwar al-Sadat wanted a limited victory to subsequently achieve peace. He knew that Israel would only give up the Sinai Peninsula, which it had annexed and settled, if Egypt showed that it had to be taken seriously militarily in the future. A major victory that would make Israeli fear for its survival or a systematic attack on civilians would have been counterproductive. Israel allowed this self-restraint by Egypt not to react too harshly. Hamas, on the other hand, categorically denies the possibility for peace. For them, there is only the destruction of Israel and the Jews. A quick, simple solution, an imminent ceasefire followed by lasting peace and Israeli territory handover in a few years, seems currently out of the question, to the detriment of all involved. History repeats itself, but as a tragedy. Now it's your turn. What do you think will happen to the Gaza Strip after the conclusion of the Israeli offensive? Will Israel annex it? Will it hand it over to Fatah? Or do you have an idea of what will happen? Write your opinion in the comment section. If you liked the video, click the thumbs up, and if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. If you want to support the channel, you can do so through the means in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back.